I am writing a fear memoir for my creative writing class. I'm not sure if I should share this or not, so I wanted to post here first and get an opinion. Should I say YOLO, or say why I am afraid of deer? I almost got ran over by one before. So basically serious versus comical. This is a subject I'd rather avoid writing about. Some may not believe me, some may picture me as an insane person, or some may actually believe me. I may be judged and criticised. This is ultimately up to the reader to decide. However, this is my truth. I am very, very scared of the dark. This isn't some normal childish fear where your parents say, "Honey, there's nothing under your bed, go back to sleep." This is much more insidious than that. I literally need to sleep with the light on. I need to be vigilant of what's around me. I need to wake up and see light, not darkness. What occurred was not some dream or a fluke. During the end of my 8th grade year, home was not the best. To put it bluntly, my father was a dirty, lying cheater. There were fights where my sister Jessica, little brother Ulysses, whom at the time was 6 months old, ran away from our house. My father was also an alcoholic. Sometimes I didn't know who he was anymore. You may be wondering, why is she talking about her father, the fights, the alcoholism? What does this have to do with becoming scared of the dark? Well, my father used to bartend, and he worked at a luxurious hotel in the National Harbour. This is where he met a Cuban woman. Let's call her Letty. If you haven't guessed it by now, yes, she's that woman. Some may call her a homewrecker, but honestly, my parents are still together, so that word doesn't seem fit. After Letty and my dad ended it, she must have done something to him. Cursed him, hexed him. Honestly, I don't know. What I do know is that this deeply scarred my heart. Exactly the time after he left her, something was very wrong with my father. He would act very differently. He began to randomly scream. What was more surprising was him screaming Bible verses. My father, 1.0, was not a religious man. He liked to watch anime with me. He let me listen to my music, let me decorate my room with my eerie drawings. He liked skulls and demon-looking things. But it all changed. As I said before, he would randomly scream Bible verses. He made us pray as a family every night. We have never done this before. Why now? I would ask myself time after time. Slowly the feeling of the house started to change. I felt like there was always something behind me. When I would look though, there was absolutely nothing. Visually, a huge emptiness. Physically, a deep, chilling feeling shivering down my entire being. Imagine walking around in the comfort of your own home with the feeling that something is watching you. It was very uncomfortable. This was only the beginning. During the night I would sleep in darkness with the exception of a dim blue radio clock glowing on my nightstand. One's vision becomes obscure in the dark, but it felt like I would see something with an incredible malice in its face right above me. Very soon after I would hear small footsteps running on the brown carpet floor. Later on that night the same steps would echo in the hallway. Quickly I would turn on my nightstand light. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself cry in fear. I wanted this night to end. My sister would have night terrors and scream in her sleep, kicking and fighting whatever she dreamt of. My little brother, my mother, my father and I would have nightmares almost every night. Mirrors would fall, lights would flicker, and light bulbs would break. Praying with my family before sleep became a routine. Going to church was something I dreaded but had to do. It became so bad where we could no longer sleep in our own home. We ended up in my grandparents' house for about a week. My sister and I would sleep on the couch. My parents and brother would sleep in the guest room. During the first night I heard crashing and the lights suddenly blinded me. My sister and I ran to see what had happened. As soon as we reached the room, my father jumped out, pointing at the floor. He was saying things I couldn't understand. He was speaking in tongues. When he finally came to, he angrily expressed the gold cross my mother let him borrow burned his neck and chest. It felt as though the nightmare would never end. Eventually, a cleansing was performed at my house. This was the saddest day. All of my Vladimir Todd books were thrown away. My drawings, posters, and band shirts were in the trash as well. Nowhere to be found. Life was very different for a while. I slept with my parents until freshman year. I was forced to go to church. I don't like the idea of religion. I felt like a fake person. Eventually, I was able to become myself again, however. One aspect has never changed. I still sleep with a source of light to illuminate my room just enough. I would still have frequent nightmares, but I learned to just accept them, change my sleeping position, and move on. As I said before, you may not believe what you've just read, but I assure you, this is why I'm fearful of the darkness. I live in a small town and go to school with my best friend. We always help each other, and I asked him if he'd like to go for a walk one night. He said yes, so I asked my parents if it was okay, and they said yes. I was really happy. After my training, I went shopping with my friend to buy some snacks, chocolate, crisps, cookies, and juice. After that, we started our adventure, and we walked through the streets. It was really dark, so we got out our phone flashlights. My friend spotted somewhere for us to sit so we could dig in with our snacks. We stuffed our faces, then carried on our walk until I started hearing some footsteps. "Did you hear that?" I said. "What do you mean?" my friend replies. "Did you hear footsteps?" He laughed and said, "Don't try to scare me, I know what you're up to." I told him to forget about it. It was now 1 a.m. Walking along another 30 minutes, I saw a bus stop and said, "Let's go home. I'm tired after all those snacks." "Yeah, I need to sleep too." We sat and waited for a bus to come. I looked at my phone and there's no service. Odd, I think to myself. "The bus will be here in the next 2 minutes," my friend says. Suddenly we hear a man screaming. We look up and see a man. Once our eyes had adjusted, we could see he was being bitten into by some kind of beast. It looked like a werewolf. We were frozen with terror. He was eating that screaming man's flesh, and we had to wait 1 more minute before the bus arrived. "We can't stay here waiting. This monster will eat us next. Let's run down the road until we see the bus." My friend agreed, and we ran and ran as fast as we could, but that werewolf had spotted us and was running after us. We were so scared. Adrenaline was pumping through our hearts so fast. The werewolf was as black as the night, and he had red, blooded eyes. He hadn't caught up with us yet, and we noticed a car driving up the road towards us. I shouted to my friend to wave the driver down. We frantically waved our arms until the car stopped and the driver said, "Get in, boys." He asked us what had happened. We explained the situation and he laughed at us. "A black werewolf? Don't be ridiculous." The man's face changed when he noticed the creature that had been chasing us. He freaked out and sped up. He looked back again to where this creature was, but it was gone. We eventually made it home safely. I could hear the news reporter on the TV and he said, "A strange-looking animal, half human, half beast, has been reported to have eaten 5 human bodies out in the streets. If anyone has any information, please call us." Shit. What if we hadn't made it? What if we'd gotten so tired we couldn't run anymore? We didn't want to tell anyone other than our parents. They never allowed me out at night again. I live in a small town called Austell. Not many people live here and it's quite empty. I still lived with my parents when I was 16. My parents went out of town for the week, so I invited my friends Austin, Nick and Jeremy over to hang out. They all showed up at the house around 3 in the afternoon. We planned to just hang out and play video games all night. About 5 hours had passed and we all decided we needed food. They all brought their own various foods. Bags of chips, sodas, candy and popcorn. We all dug in. "Hey Nick, can you throw me a Dr. Pepper?" Austin yelled across the room even though everyone was sitting right next to him. I turned on the TV to just throw on a movie. I believe it was Cloverfield that was on, when the TV suddenly cut over to static. The thing we heard next was terrifying. Emergency broadcast system. There has been a recent outbreak that has turned humans into creatures that are slowly moping around and eating raw animals. If you live in Douglas, Marietta, Austell, or Kennesaw, make sure to lock all your doors and lock all of your windows. And do not open the door to anyone. Police are working on the cases. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. We all looked at each other confused and laughed it off like it was nothing. Another hour passed and the sun was about to set. Suddenly we heard a loud noise outside. I cautiously looked out of the window. There was a woman sitting in front of a newly killed deer, eating the meat from the inside and pulling its flesh off of its bones. I didn't say anything to anyone because I didn't want to scare them, but I walked over to the doors quickly and locked all of them. Then I blocked all of the windows. Austin saw me and asked what was up. I told all three of them what I'd just seen after I made sure everything was blocked up. We sat in silence and listened to the loud moans outside. After about 15 minutes had passed, we heard sirens and a lot of gunshots were fired. Then the moaning stopped. Then 3 knocks were heard from the door. "Police, open up!" Nick quickly jumped up and began to open the door. The rest of us yelled at him not to. "Come on guys, we heard him. It's the police. We heard the gunshots and we know everything is fine." He slung the door open. The cop that was just banging on the door fell to the ground with what looked like a giant hole in his chest. Everyone screamed and ran. I pushed the door shut and tried to lock it, but since the cop was in the way, I couldn't move it anywhere. "Quick, in the basement," I screamed as everyone was scrambling through the house. My basement had one of those locks on the inside, so we closed the door and I locked it. Everyone tried pulling out their phones and dialing the cops, but all lines were dead. We heard stomping above us, and then came the moaning. "What the hell is going on?" Jeremy asked quietly. No one had an answer. Everyone remained quiet. I always had blankets and extra food in the basement just in case a tornado hit, and now I'm glad I did this, not knowing I was going to be in a zombie-like outbreak. Then there was a giant cracking sound. I looked up and all I saw was wood being picked up and thrown across the house. Something had stuck its hand through the floor and made a huge hole. We stayed as quiet as we could, and about 30 minutes later we heard whatever it was go back outside. Then somehow everyone fell asleep. I woke up in my bed and found everyone else was on my floor. What happened last night? And what were those things? Everyone looked at me confused, like nothing had happened. None of you remember what happened last night. What do you mean? We stayed up all night playing COD and all passed out around the same time, Nick explained. I told them about what I remembered happening and they all shook their heads saying no. It couldn't have been a dream though, because a few minutes later I got up and saw the hole. We could see through it into the basement. There were scratches all over my door and a giant red stain on it. That was 5 years ago and no one still seems to remember it. Did I go crazy? Or has this happened to anybody else? First things first, I sincerely believe that skinwalkers are real. Not the bullshit that Hollywood made them out to be, but the ones I was taught by my elders. As you can probably tell, I'm Native American, Navajo to be exact. All my life I was told about skinwalkers, who are really just people who practice traditional ways with the dark intent, and how to avoid them. I live on a reservation, so they were common knowledge. I never truly knew they existed until I saw one with my own eyes. Keep in mind I was about 14 at the time. As I said before, I live on a reservation. However, I live in a community that's a bit like a small suburb. We hardly see any supernatural activity, other than ghosts, because the house we live in was found to be on a small Indian burial ground. I know it's cliché as hell. Well, After Thanksgiving, my window broke due to robbers trying to get in, and maintenance said they had to order a new one. So for a month I had a broken window, and it was winter. At night I'd put some extra blankets on to block out the cold, and I laid a wooden board against it in the back. During the first week of doing this, I would hear a whistle coming out from the darkness by the road behind me. At night I'll sometimes hear a knock on the board and a whistle near the window, and one time a stick was thrown towards me. I thought nothing of it and just assumed it was some kids messing with me, but as the weeks went by I started getting spooked. One night while I was in the back of the house, I saw a dog on the road. I saw it due to a car coming fast and running into it. I was like, damn, and went back to placing the board. However, I heard the dog whimper and thought it must be alive, so I turned around. I saw the dog limp away into a bush and out the other side. A man appeared in full wolf fur and walking with a limp. I thought I was the only one who saw it, but a neighbour who lives close to the road yelled out, "What the fuck?" At that point, the half-man, half-wall ran towards me and I panicked. I ran inside and told my dad, who ran out with a bat. He met with my neighbour who had his rifle and they went out to check. When they came back, my dad said that there was just a wolf pelt on the ground. We called the police who came by and checked the whole community, and nothing. After that night, I never heard anything whistle in the back. Say what you want, but that got me woke to the supernatural. I have other stories to tell, mostly about skinwalkers and ghosts I have encountered. Years ago, my mum, sisters, brother and I lived in an apartment complex near a large patch of woods. My little sister, who was 16, and I, who was 18, loved to go for walks for 20 to 30 minutes. We'd never go together since we lived with 3 other people and shared a room. Alone time was hard to come by. We were always careful, but lately we were extra cautious because a lone car had been sitting there for days without anyone coming to grab it. We'd passed it numerous times and told our mum, but she said not to worry about it. So, on this eventful day, my little sister had gone for her normal walk. It was just before sundown and Mum was cooking dinner. Not even 10 minutes later, my little sister comes running back inside. We're stunned because she never runs since she has asthma and Mum doesn't want us disturbing the neighbours. Her face is red and sweaty, her eyes wild and her hair puffy. I don't know exactly what was said, except that she said she found blood in the woods. I didn't believe her and thought it was berry juice. She wanted to prove it to me, so she asked me to come with her back into the woods. I don't know how my mum was cool with us going back outside, but we did. I followed my sister, eager to see what she was talking about. We arrived at the entrance to the woods where I began to notice something was wrong. The car that had been parked there for days was now gone. I told my sister this and she had said she'd noticed it, but didn't think anything of it. We continued into the woods where she took me to the side spot where the grass was nearly dirt and the trees shaded above us. I looked down and between our feet was a small puddle of berry juice. I laughed at seeing her nervous reaction. Dude, that's not blood, it's berry juice. There aren't any berry trees around here. I looked up around and saw she was right. No berries. Still, it could have been an animal carrying some berries from somewhere else, right? I told her this, but I could tell she didn't believe me. So to prove to her, and myself, that it was fine, I squatted down so that I was level with the small puddle. And then I paused. I paused because I'd seen berry juice before. Back at the old apartments we'd lived in, I remember berries being crushed and a thin liquid spread around like water. But this was a thick crimson, brownish because of the dirt. But still, I didn't believe it. So like an idiot, I took my finger. Stop! We don't know if it's blood or not. If it is, your DNA will be in it and make you a suspect. I retracted my finger, thankfully seeing sense. I don't remember much, but I told her we should go back home and tell Mum what we found. After dinner, we went back. We didn't get as far as last time, only because the place was swarmed with cops. Caution tape was in place so that the surrounding onlookers couldn't get in. Even the news trucks were there. No one was told what had happened until about a week later. and to this day I'm still freaked out. Turns out a poor jogger had come across the body of a decapitated man found not too far from us. The abandoned car that had been sitting there had been his. Honestly, I wish this story ended here, but it doesn't. It turns out the man had a girlfriend who was 8 months pregnant. The two of them, as reports had said, wanted to spice up their sex life, so they had paid to meet a guy on Craigslist, and things went south from there. After killing the man, the killer took the girlfriend back to his house where he tortured her for 5 days before killing her. He put her body in the trunk of his car and was chased by the police down the highway until he crashed the vehicle and ended his own life. People called him the Craigslist Killer, and this is why to this day I stay the hell away from that site. I wanted to share this story because the 5-year anniversary of the incident had passed last month, and the skull of the decapitated man was found just earlier this year in 2019. The murder took place in 2014. Another poor soul had discovered the human skull near someone's private property. My apologies go out to the families of those who suffered, but please do not go on Craigslist looking for sex, and if you do, I can't stop you. Always be prepared for the worst and please bring backup.